Shalom Aleichem to all you all, and thank you for joining us today. I happen to be in Gan Yisrael in upstate New York. I cover the Yarchikala, which is made for the last, I don't know how many years, 50 years perhaps, in the honor of the Rebbe's father's yahrzeit, which is next week, Rov of. And so there's many Rabbanim here, and Rosh Hashivas, and I've already joined in some shiurim. And I took out a few minutes to join with you, not to be a mavatal lekvias of a weekly shiur. And so let's go straight into our first shaila. And that is, someone asks about when you do shnai mikro ve'achatargum, do you have to say the trop once or both times? So first of all, you're probably mekayim shnai mikro even without trop. What is the reason for shnai mikro? And the pashtus is to familiarize yourself with the Torah, and certainly the trop helps to this. And okay, so now it's not mafurish. Alter Rebbe doesn't say you have to say it with trop bichlal. What you do have on the screen is, first of all, I found this in Eitz Chaim, and he sends this to Machzik Bracha. From the Chidor, there's a few Sforim. I'll say the HaShulchan Aruch. Perhaps the first one was the Birkei Yosef, and then he's got Machzik Bracha, Tosfos Bracha, and the new edition has them all together, siman by siman. So here's the Lashon of the Machzik Bracha, and siman Reish Pei Hei, that's the Hilchos Shabbos after Kriyas HaTorah, has the siman about Shnai Mikra Ve'Chatargum. Kil Kvel Deno, Tzorech Lizoy is like a Lashon of a Pasuk, Daniel, Tzorech Lizoy Mikra, Bekriyas HaMikra, Beneginas HaTaimim, Be'Sholem, Be'Shebifnim. You should be reading the Shnai Mikra with the trop. Kach Shomaynu, Shehoya Mazir Ma'oid, Rav HaChosid, Ramosha HaKoyen, Zechrena, whatever, Meir Fis, probably from Fez in Latalmidov, that he would say when she Zaharu Bekriyas Shnai Mikra Ve'Chatargum, when you do Shnai Mikra Ve'Chatargum, Likris HaMikra, to when you should read the Mikra, it's like poetic. He's taking from Hilchos Isra Heter, Neusim Tam L'Shevach, that when you give the trop, it is also adding to the quality of your learning. Now, you have there are different opinions in history at what point does the trop come in, and the derech of Alpi Kabbalah is tanto, which is taimim nekudus tagin oisius halocho l'Moshe Messinai. So as far as we're concerned, the trop is also nitnu l'Moshe Messinai. So it's part of it's in indigenous part of Torah, and therefore one should be saying the trop wherever, if you can. If you know trop, you should be mavaseder with trop. The violates the bechalin of Mizara Zayin, the minyan for Shnai Mikra. I have a cousin. I came to him, lives in Eitz Chaim. I come to him on Friday afternoon. He's sitting in his Maveh. He says, and one time he went in Kiddush. He was about 15, and the Rebbe said, without asking, the Rebbe said, "This man's you should be Maveh on Friday afternoon." So from then on, is Chayk V'Layaver. I've told this once before, perhaps, but he makes sure to be Maveh on Friday afternoon. Now, I want to share with you also, you have in the Reshimas HaYemen. And it has here, the Frierdiker Rebbe tells the Rebbe, and the Rebbe writes this down. The Frierdiker Rebbe is talking about his father, the Rebbe Rasham. When you heard him be Maver Seder, Nishma Ke'ilu Ish Poni Legamri Mikola Sokim Hu. He gave you the impression that he's got no worries on his head, totally free from any pressures. He was totally in this, and no pressure for anything else. Sometimes he didn't finish to be Maver Seder on the Friday, because in the indulgent way which he was enjoying the Mavis Hedre, he has no worries, but sometimes he ran out of time. So then he would finish off Mavis Hedre on Shabbos. Which he started before Shabbos. But he wouldn't be mafsik be'emtza parsha. Lefomim, he says he would start on Yom Hey Messiah Shabbos Kiddush, and he finishes off. Why did he stop? He was so much energy into the Mavis Hedre that he had to continue, so he ran out of koyach. So just tells us how much koyach he invested in the Mavis Hedre sign. Mezok Tatach Sam Soifer, that when he was Mavis Hedre, he would also have an opportunity to reflect on the Sedre, and many of the Chidushim which he was Mechadish were kind of came to mind during Mavis Sedre. There's a different way of learning things step by step, and there's another way of kind of getting the bigger picture. Mavis Sedre is an opportunity of seeing the bigger picture. Okay. Now we'll go on to the next question. So someone asks me about the Lashon, if you forgot to say Ya'aleh v'Yoveh. So the rule is in Shmoine Esrei, if you forgot to say Ya'aleh v'Yoveh, the night of Rosh Chodesh, and that's true for the first night and the second night, if you forgot to say Ya'aleh v'Yoveh at Maariv, so then you do not have to repeat the Shmoine Esrei. Whereas if it's during the day, you forgot Ya'aleh v'Yoveh, Shem Shachar Mincha, you would have to repeat. So here is you have in the Tilas Hashem Siddur, and perhaps it should be, I've said this before, the Tilas Hashem Siddur was a copy of a Siddur called Siddur Avodah, published in Vilna Tofresh Ein Aleph. It was published by a local printer, published also in other Nuschos, and part of their mandate, their mission, was to make a siddur which would be easy for chinuch, for children to keep up with, and they also inserted sections of halacha. So some sections of halacha they took from Alter Rebbe's siddur, and they were the same as Siddur Harav, sometimes from the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. Unfortunately, we do not have Hilchos Rosh Chodesh in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, and so here they take from the Derech HaChaim, from Rabbi Eikev Lissa. So let's read the words. He says, Shochach leimar beresh Chodesh Ya'aleh v'Yoveh be'arvis. You forgot to say Ya'aleh v'Yoveh at Maariv, afilu b'leil sheni shel Rosh Chodesh, even the second night. Ein tzorich lazer, you do not have to repeat. No, so now you see this lashon, ein tzorich lazer. So the fellow who asked me the shaila, fine Chassidus Yid, he says, yes, ein tzorich lazer, which means I don't have to repeat. But if I want, perhaps I can choose to repeat. So can't I? So here's his question. And I said to him, you can do it Tfilas Nadova. No, he says, no, I'm in the middle of Meidim. And I realize that I forgot to say Ya'aleh v'Yoveh. Am I allowed to go back to it, say? He says, Ein tzorich lachzer. Ein tzorich lachzer means you're not mechuyev, but you can if you want. That's how he was reading. So it's a diuk in the lashon of Ein tzorich of the Derech HaChaim. So we'll come back to the diuk in a moment, but let's take a look at the halacha the way it is in Shulchan Aruch. You can see here, Tov Kof Beis. It says, you say Ya'aleh v'Yoveh, and says the Machaber, V'im lo yamore be'arvis, ein machzirin eiseh. And then he goes on, and he says, of Eizin Mochen Shenizker, ein nechezer. It's clear that Amor says, ein nechezer. If you remembered your mission in middle of Meidim, middle of Sim Shalom, ein nechezer. And he gives us a cross-reference to Sim Reish Tzadik Dalet. That's obviously the halachas of Atachen Antano, which is another one of those things which are included in Shmoine Esrei, but if you forgot, you do not have to repeat the Shmoine Esrei. So we're looking at Simareish Tzadik Dalet in the Chaber, where you were told you don't repeat the Shmoine Esrei. Here, doesn't it? It's Ein Chezer. Yod Keshasim HaBrocha Ein Leilarzer. Even if you haven't started Moedim, you finish you can't go back. Sorry, I mixed up. If in Hadas, he finished the bracha, he can't go back. If he finished off Shmoine Esrei, you can repeat the Shmoine Esrei. אבל אם עדיין לא סיים תפילוסו, יעמיד לו Shmoine Esrei real obliged, didn't say התוכן נתנו, אין רשאי לעשות. You wouldn't be allowed to go back. So it's clear, although in Hilchos Rosh Chodesh, it's not so clear that he's not allowed to go back, but this is clear and in the cross-reference in Din Mavial of Yove. And this is Reish Tzadik Dal Baruch Hashem, we have in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, where he says, Avalim siyem tfilosoi, you can go back to as a tfilos nedova, and here he says clearly, but af im reitzel lahachmer al atzmoi, you're not allowed to go back in the middle of the davening. You're not allowed to, because it's a bracha she'einot tzrich. The repetition wouldn't be a bracha she'einot tzricha. So it's very clear. Now, just to finish off, so what do we do with the lashon of einot tzarich? So in the Siddur, I have the Alter Rebbe talks about somewhere. I don't know. It's in somewhere in Birchas Hasha, in the halochos of Birchas Hashachar. So it's before brachas. In my Siddur, it's page Yud Zayin and Horah 65. And I have a list there, perhaps of 8 places where you have the lashon einot tzarich. And it doesn't mean einot tzarich that you don't have to, but it means you're not allowed to. Because if you don't have to say a bracha, to say it, and where it's not warranted, it could be a bracha she'einot tzricha at least. And my hunch was there that in Yiddish, you say, I'll say medaf hazeh ton. In Yiddish, when you say medaf hazeh ton, doesn't mean only that you don't have to do it. It means it's not appropriate, you shouldn't do so. So therefore, when the Dayan Chaim also spoke in Yiddish, so when he wrote Ein Tzorech Lachzer, he actually meant to say it's not the right thing to do. It's a mild expression of saying it's not allowed. It's saying it's inappropriate to say it. Okay, let's move on. A couple of questions here. Right, so someone's pointing out on Rosh Chodesh, if you forgot the Yalav Yove in Shachris, if you've already davened Musaf, then you do not have to repeat the Shmoine Esrei of Shachris. That is true. Right, let's move on. Tfilas Nedova would not be appropriate on the Shabbos. Very well. Okay, let's move on to our next question. And here is in a particular community, and they have a Kiddush every Shabbos, and they are, I've forgotten where the shiur was from, but nowadays many, the broader community are very conscientious about saving the world from too much waste. And so the union of disposable dishes has become very un-PC. So they have our ladies guild, they set up the Kiddush, and afterwards they want to wash up and put everything tidily away, which would be very nice, balabatish. The problem is, it's Shabbos. Are you allowed to tidy up the Kiddush and wash the dishes and put them in their places? Otherwise, it means they'll have to come back on Motzei Shabbos or on Sunday. So is that legitimate for them to, or is it not okay? So basically, I said it's not okay. And here we have from the Shmiras Shabbos Halocho, the reference is Perik Chavches, Sif Peites. We're talking about not Melocha, but Tircha. It says even less. Oh, so he writes the following: something which is not a Melocha, not even Darbanon, and it's not an effort. Now he adds another point. If it's the kind of thing you normally do when you're finished, then you're allowed to do so on Shabbos, even though you can have benefit for afterwards. So when you finish Shabbos lunch, you are allowed to put the leftovers back in the fridge. Why are you putting it back in the fridge? Because it says in the Zohar, Shabbos b'nei misborchin kula yamin, that the whole week's food is the leftovers of Shabbos. Yeah, that's just an English joke. Akaponim. So you have here that it's normal. You finish off eating, you put away the food. That's okay. And therefore, he goes further, that to take the dishes which are being used, and if you leave them, then the traces of sholm will become dry, and become hardened, it's going to be much harder to clean the dishes after Shabbos. So you are allowed to take the dishes and soak them in water. And this way, this level of softness which it has will remain. But if already they become hardened, been left for an hour or two, so you wouldn't be allowed to soak them on Shabbos, because the soaking on Shabbos is to make life easier on Motzei Shabbos. So an effort which is to do something on Shabbos, not just to preserve the present, but to make it better for Motzei Shabbos, that's not allowed. Now, that doesn't directly relate to our question, but certainly he describes as she'ein basi yoseh mishum tircha. It's a simple act. You finish, you put it away. Washing dishes is, I understand, even for women, is considered a tircha. It takes time, it's an effort, and therefore it's clearly it would not be included in this heter. They say it wouldn't be allowed. And in the bottom, I have here also from the Shmiras Shabbos Halocho. This is you're making a simcha, you're making a shalom zocher, you're making a sheva brachas in a hall, and now Baruch Hashem, Baruch Atah b'veyecho, Baruch Atah b'tzeisecho, and now the simcha is everyone's gone. Now you clear up. So are you allowed to tidy up to some level? Possibly you can, but to make it a whole back to where you found it, that wouldn't be okay. If you need if someone needs a space on Shabbos, that's a different story. But to start putting it back the way it was before Shabbos wouldn't be allowed because of Hachon Shabbos the Kiddush L'Chayil. So that's the same thing here with the washing of the dishes. That would be a tircha, and it wouldn't be legitimate to wash up the dishes when they're not needed for the same day. Let's move on to the next question. So here, finding a man is so I don't have a slide on this one. So he is a Talmud Chochem, and he was in Shul with his little girl, and she needed some kind of attention. And so he took her out, and then by the time he finished dealing with her issues, he came back, and in Shul they were already finished Musaf, about to daven Mincha, and so he had the dilemma: do you do Musaf or Mincha? And being Talmud Chacham, he knew that he can daven Mincha now, and he'll daven Musaf later. That's what he did. Okay, that's not our discussion. He asks then that in Musaf and in the bracha which finishes off on Kiddush Shabbos. So Friday night we have Veinוחo vo Yisrael Mekadosh Shemecho, and in Shabbos morning is Veinוחo vo Yisrael Mekadosh Shemecho, and Shabbos Mincha is Veinוחo vom. So now he's davening Musaf after Mincha. So he's asking if such a thing arises again, should he say at Musaf after Mincha? Should he say Veinוחo vo because that's the way it's written in the Siddur, or should he say Veinוחo vom because it's after Mincha? So my first reaction was it was like the boy who's davening Shachris on Friday after Chatzos and he's asking, do I skip Tachna because it's after Chatzos? But on a more serious level, actually there's a Ha'orah of the Rebbe in the Machzer at Ne'ilah, and the Rebbe questions whether if Yom Kippur works out on Shabbos, do you say Veinוחo vom or do you say Veinוחo voi? And the Rebbe says he's more noted to say vom shehi la'achar mincha. So the Rebbe is, and it's interesting how the Rebbe is so cautious to introduce a new girsa. He says he can't find it. Then eventually someone does give him a reference. So there it says shehi la'achar mincha. So in Svora, perhaps you should be saying, or you can say shehi la'achar mincha, that in Ne'ilah is standard after Mincha. Here it's not standard, it's just to be mikra, as they say. And therefore, I don't think it's a proof. And I would be more noted to say we have the approach You follow what's written in the Siddur, and the Malachim all sorted out that the Musaf really belonged before Mincha. I have my cue for this, and with the Maisa with the Frierdiker Rebbe, when there was a question of Yom Tov was on Friday, and the question was by invention, they had a Fabrengen going in from Yom Tov into Shabbos, and can you say, let's say, and then say Yalav Yoveh? Or should you say perhaps Yalav Yoveh for the Friday, and then you say for the Shabbos? And then the Rebbe answered, the Frierdiker Rebbe answered, follow what's written in the Siddur, and the Malachim will sort it out. So I'm using that approach here also. There's a certain Kabbalas Ale. That's what a Siddur is all about, a Kabbalas Ale. You say what's the state in Siddur. Right. Now I'm going on to my question number 5. So no one asked me the question, but I noticed in a particular minyan that the Bal Korei was a very good Bal Korei. He was standing and not holding the Eitz Chaim. Generally, the minhag is that the Bal Korei, the Oile Torah holds the Sefer Torah with his right hand. During the brachas, you hold it in both hands, and then during Kriyas HaTorah, you hold it with the right hand. And the Bal Korei is on the other side, with the whole be holding either with the right hand or the left hand. Lapoil, I'm going to tell you, I looked around, and if someone's going to tell me that they found somewhere, I'll be grateful and I'll share it. B'shmoy, shalei b'shmoy, whatever they prefer. I could not find that it says that the Bal Korei has to hold the Sefer Torah b'shas Kriyas HaTorah. But now let's take a look about what about the ones Oile Torah. So here we have in Shulchan Aruch and the Hidinim of Kriyas HaTorah, Simen Kuf Lamed Tes. So let's read inside. Says the Mechaber, HaKoireh b'Torah tzorich leches b'Sefer Torah b'shas habracha. When you're reading the Torah, you should be holding the Sefer Torah when you're saying the bracha. And this, the Ramo adds, we have a basis for this, a support, when it was in the context of Yeshua, and he says to the Bnei Yisrael, La yomush sefer haTorah hazeh mipicha. I don't remember who said it to whom. La yomush sefer haTorah hazeh mipicha, that the words of Torah should not budge, should not move away from your mouth. Chazak ve'amatz, you should be strong and courageous. So what's the apostle got to do with this? My understanding is he's saying the holding on the Sefer Torah, that's the chazak. Chazak ve'amatz, so to hold firm the Sefer Torah. Now, so that's where it comes from, this union of holding the Sefer Torah. But then, let's be medayik. The Mechaber, the Shulchan Aruch says, leches b'Sefer Torah b'shas bracha. It means that the same time you say the bracha, you should be holding the Sefer Torah. Doesn't mean you have to hold it the whole time. And why shtavke b'shas bracha? Well, very simple. We have many mitzvahs, and we have a practice, a seder, that the article upon which you make the bracha, you hold in your hand. So you're making a bracha on the lulav. There's a whole parsha where they're holding the esrog this way, that way. But when you make a bracha on something, you hold it in your hand. My colleague of mine, Baruch Oberlander, once wrote that the fact that we look at the sukkah, the schach, when we say the bracha leishev sukkah, is also in the same vein. You can't hold the schach, but there's a kind of to connect with it as well as you can. And therefore, when you make the bracha, b'shas bracha, then you have to hold the Sefer Torah. But who says you have to hold it for the rest of the time? And if shenisht. Now, bear in mind also, I don't know whether the Mechaber had Sefer Torah like we have, or like the Sfardim. The Sfardim have got the Sefer Torah in these large cases, and you don't have to. It stands firmly, and it's safe. It's standing vertically, and you just follow the text. So there's no need to hold it the whole time. And possibly, therefore, it's only b'shas bracha. In the Kaf HaChaim, he has a whole thing about Kabbalah with Shem Eikev, and with Gematria, a whole thing about the holding the Sefer Torah. Again, this is all said about B'shas Birchas HaTorah. Just one last thing, in the Sefer HaMinhogim, Chabad Minhogim, has that the something about holding the Sefer Torah with a talus. And so instead of, out of respect for the Sefer Torah, to hold it not directly with your hands, but to hold it with the talus. And the Rebbe in the Ha'orah says, but The only person he saw who did this was the Frierdiker Rebbe. Once a year, the Rebbe was called up to the Torah together with the Frierdiker Rebbe. So the Rebbe himself held the Sefer Torah without the talus. And he was vaguely remember the Rebbe is explaining, since sometimes he's Eilul Torah and not wearing a talus. And there, of course, he has to hold it with his hands. Therefore, Leiplug, he always holds the Sefer Torah with his hands. Now, on Simchas Torah, the Gabe would announce Ya'amed, and you say the Frierdiker Rebbe's name, Ben, the Rebbe Rashab's name, and then V'Ya'amed, the Rebbe's name. This time they called the Rebbe by name, Ben his father's name. And so that was an event where the Frierdiker Rebbe was Kivyochel present. For that Aliyah, the Rebbe would hold the Sefer Torah with the talus, because the Frierdiker Rebbe is holding with the talus. So that's that was the explanation why the Rebbe did this Hanhoga. Let's go on to a totally different topic, and that is, many of you are, I'm sure, have heard this idea not to wear open-backed shoes on Shabbos in the street. And so this we have in Siman Shin Aleph. Siman Shin Aleph talks about wearing clothes and carrying. So here we have, you can see it on the screen, you have something called pantinish. So pantinish is apparently, that's how those who translate it, that it's a kind of open back clog or shoe. So first Shita says that you are allowed to wear them on Shabbos, even though they can slip off easily, since the foot fits into the leather well, then you don't have to worry that they'll slip off totally. There are places where they're noyeg to be more particular, not to wear them on Shabbos. And if you did, you don't have to take them off. Okay. So what is the shoyeles sent me a picture of the type of shoe she's asking about, which is helpful. So according to the stricter opinion in Shulchan Aruch, one shouldn't be wearing such an open-backed shoe. And there seems to be the concern is that it might slip off. And what will happen if it slips off? The next thing is you'll carry it in your hands. You'll carry it home. You'll walk barefoot, holding the sandal, the croc, whatever it may be, in your hand. Since that is the understanding of the Chumrah, so now you have on the screen, you have from the Piskei Teshuvos, in Siman also, in that place, in Siman Shin Aleph. So he says, nowadays, it's not normal for people to walk barefoot, mamish, in the street. And even if it falls off, you never seen that someone's shoes falls off, or he picks it up and the car starts walking with it. Very, very unlikely. And therefore, because the lifestyle has been changed, you can see pictures from pre-war Europe. You see the poverty, and sometimes you see people walking around either mamish barefoot, or their feet are wrapped around with newspapers. They couldn't afford shoes. But Baruch Hashem, nowadays this kind of poverty we do not see, and therefore there's no chashash that you'll carry your shoe home, and as a result, you are allowed to wear them on Shabbos in the street. In the left of the screen, what about Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur, he says, some people walk just with the socks, without special shoes, and still we rely in mitzvah on the lenient opinion that you're allowed to wear slippers in the street. So, to which I would respond even further. I don't know about in Eitz Chaim where this is published. Perhaps there are people on Yom Kippur walk around mamish just in their socks, but in London I haven't seen anyone walking around covered Yom Kippur, walking around with socks in the streets. Then we go back. It's not normal to carry them home, and therefore it's okay. All right. Let's see if someone put so someone's adding to me, according to Rabbi AI, The Bal Korei does not need to hold the Sefer Torah. All right. I can't even offer AI a reward in Gan Eden for giving me such a clear answer. Someone also writes here about the Ein Tzodi, that they have a similar lotion in Yom Kippur. Now, I'm going to tell you that by Yom Kippur, that lotion, you compare even till Hashem Sidurim, and also you compare to Torah.
Wearing that type of.
I have a comment about this. There are a number of versions of that sentence. Therefore, don't prove from the way it is put there in that particular place. We're going to go on to our next question, but thank you all for the feedback. It's always encouraging and helpful. Right. So someone asks, is saying good Shabbos before Shabbos tantamount to accepting Shabbos? So here you have this is from a sefer from Rabbis Michael Zelikson and Hoggis about Shabbos from the Rabbeim, etc. So one time, someone came Erev Shabbos before he was traveling, Friday afternoon. Rebbe Simpson went into the Frierdiker Rebbe and he wished the Rebbe a good Shabbos. And the Rebbe said, on Friday afternoon, you should say a guten Erev Shabbos. So, and then he has in the note, he has the name of Shaul Friedman, and Reb Zalman Jaffe, Alav Shalom, said that he had a similar thing, experience with the Frierdiker, with the Rebbe, that he wished the Rebbe a guten Shabbos on a Friday afternoon. And the Rebbe told them, we say a guten Erev Shabbos. And then he quotes from Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, also not to say Shabbat Shalom, but Erev Shabbat Shalom. So we have here certainly a Zehiris, that on Friday not to say Good Shabbos, on Friday afternoon. You say Good Shabbos on Thursday, it has no bearing, but on Friday afternoon, since it means the later, the more likely, it may be perceived as a Kabbalah Shabbos. Therefore, we avoid saying Good Shabbos on Friday afternoon. It may be conscientious and say a Guten Erev Shabbos. But I highly doubt that any of these Zehiris are issued b'diavad. That if a person did say Good Shabbos, therefore they are now also b'melacha, I would be very surprised if someone would take it. It's a lachatchila Zehiris to avoid speaking this way. The next point which I want to share with you is someone asked me a shaila. She's embroidering a pareches. And this pareches is to be ready in time for Rosh Hashanah. And, now is vacation time. So we're not sure whether she'd be able to finish it in time. So asking whether you're allowed to do the embroidery of the pareches during the 9 days. During the 9 days, we don't do melacha. So what about embroidering a pareches? So I was thinking about this, and we don't sew during the 9 days. What about sewing something which isn't a garment? So there's something which the Magen Avraham says about sewing kroinen, and he says that it is okay. What exactly is these kroinen? There seems to be some kind of similar to something like a tapestry of some sort. And on that basis, well, if you're allowed to do kroinen, then you should be allowed to do a pareches, which is not a garment. Then on the other side, in my mind, I was thinking that the issur of the minhag not to sew has got to do with the posuk bitzai imrasai, which has got to do with pareches. But then if I looked at it more carefully, I'd mixed up different things, and that is the following: that there is a din of not twisting wool to make it into thread, spinning wool during the 9 days, and that is because it's got to do with the shesi. Shesi, you got when you weave, there's what's called the warp and the weft. The warp is the thread which is strung on the loom, stretched over long strands from one end to the other, and then there's a weft, which is the Eikev in Hebrew, which is misarev. It goes in and out, and that's how you make cloth. So the shesi, making this the thread weaving, it reminds us of the Evan Shasio. And since in the Churban and Bayis Sheni, the Kohen Gadol, there was no Oren. It was the Oren was taken away, the hiding, etc. And so in Evan Bayis Sheni, the Ketores and Yom Kippur was placed on the Evan Shasio. Since after the Churban that avodah stopped, so the refraining from spinning thread is based upon the avodah of the Evan Shasio. Then we have the issue of sewing. This is a separate thing. But then it comes to the issue of sewing, it's got to do with simcha, to sew new garments. But then it says if you have a chasana right after the 9 days, and you need to have for the new clothes for the chasana, so there's a heter to sew new clothes for the chasana. So here you have a pareches, and you've got a limited amount of time. If it's needed in a way it couldn't be done later, then there would be mokim to be lenient, like Seich Nisuin. But then where does a bitza imrose? So the word bitza imrose literally means he implemented his statement. Hashem had said he's going to bring a korban, and he carried out that threat. That's the Pashto translation. But then there's a Targum which says boza purfiro delay. He ripped his curtain. So this is a play on the words of bitza imrose. And because of the Churban, how the historian says in the Gemara, how Titus comes in and he stabs the pareches, and the pareches starts bleeding. And so he, as the Gemara says in Gittin, he thought that he had killed Kivyochel, Chas v'Shalom, and so that's this bitza imrose. The pareches was violated. For that reason, in Tisha B'Av, there's the minhag of not putting on tzitzis. Sorry, not putting on a talus, and not making a bracha on the tzitzis, etc., because that's our kind of beged. It's also possibly the reason why we pull the pareches away of this bitza imrose. All right, so bitza imrose has got to do with things of on Tisha B'Av itself, and that's the union which we commemorate the stabbing of the pareches. But that's got nothing to do with the minhag of the 9 days. If it be just for the minhag of not sewing and not spinning wool during the 9 days, there would be room to allow the embroidery of a pareches. Generally doing tapestries, that kind of stuff. The Achronim say that they shouldn't be done. Okay. Now, the following question is something which I've never had this before. Now, I put a picture, but really the picture doesn't do justice. You don't see very clear. This is my own talus, and I was boidik the tzitzis, as you meant to do every morning before you put on make the bracha. You meant to boidik the tzitzis. Should also be boidik the tzitzis of the talus cotton. And okay, and I'm looking at the knot, and I see that the twisting of the threads has unraveled inside the knot. So you can see the tzitzis are twisted thread. Why don't they untwist? So I saw years ago where there's a small sefer by Dayan Gukovitsky called Meiser Eurig. And what's the kunz here? So the kunz is you have with our threads of the tzitzis are kofel shmoina, are made of 8 strands. Imagine if the strands themselves are twisted clockwise, and over one another, the 2 groups of 4 strands each, they are twisted, let's say, anti-clockwise. So you've got here 2 tensions within the thread itself. It wants to unwind clockwise, and in the combined thread, it wants to unwind anti-clockwise. And as a result, it doesn't go anywhere. That's the way he described it over there. Perhaps there's other details. But meanwhile, you have a din that the tzitzis have to be shizurin. They have to be twisted threads. And if the thread unravels, if the twist of the thread unravels, it's possible. So now let's take a look here on the screen. We have from the end of Siman Yud Beis that it says Kol Chut Me'aches Chutin, each thread of the 8 strands, Shenisparek Mishazirose, that it's there, but it's been unraveled. Instead of being twisted, it's now loose strands. If even if you already put them in the garment, whether it's totally unraveled and it's now become, instead of one thread, it's now become 2 threads. Which very often towards the far end, it becomes unraveled, and the main thing is still together. Kiven shahatzitzis psulim in main and shazurim, but tzitzis threads which are not twisted are not valid. We consider the unraveled thread, unraveled tzitzis strand. It's as if it was disconnected. So therefore, unraveled threads have got the same status as cut off threads. And we'll have to apply those same dinim of when part of the strands are chopped off. We'll apply also to the twisted threads. The only difference is that possibly with the untwisted threads, you can twist them back again, possibly, and repair it that way. That's a separate discussion. Because of this, so now we have from the Alter Rebbe Siddur, what do you have to be boidik? In the Shulchan Aruch, Morgan Avram is noted to say you have to be boidik every day, the long strands, because sometimes they get caught in a piece of furniture, etc. They snap, so that's why you have to be boidik the strands. But the braid, which is the beginning of the tzitzis, he doesn't see the need to be boidik every day. It's pretty safe. Now here the Alter Rebbe in the Siddur takes the stricter opinion. Every morning you put on your new talis, in the morning for Shachris, whatever, before you make the bracha, you should look carefully and check that the chutin, that the strands are in kosher condition, especially where they are on the corner of the garment, which is right at the top of the tzitzis, and in the braid. Very, very interesting. So whereas the Morgan Avram was saying the main thing is the far away, the long strand, which they're more likely to snap, here the Alter Rebbe says, no, especially. And I was always puzzled by this. So the chumrah is the following. In the threads, the long threads, if one of them snaps, the tzitzis is still kosher. Depends how much is left over. All right. You've got gadume tzitzis. If one of the strands, which is hanging from the corner of the talus, if it's snapped there, then that tzitzis is possible. Because there's a certain tolerance for the long strands. That if it's missing, it's still kosher. It's short, it's still kosher. There's a shiur nivo. I don't go to the whole details. How many you can? Not more than 3. Even 3 is too much. But if something snaps higher up, closer to the garment, so then there's no kedei nivo, and therefore it's possible. So now, therefore, if a thread snaps inside the braid, or as the braid is connected to the garment, so then the tzitzis is possible. So now, you say, here I have a situation. I'm looking at the double knot at the top of the braid, and it's unraveled. I don't know how it's possible, but it did. It unraveled inside. So my understanding is that that unraveled area is possible. And therefore, it makes the whole tzitzis possible. Could be I could undo it and twist it again, but I'll call upon him. The way it is, I wouldn't be able to make a bracha on the talus. I thought it was a shtick of Kiddush, and therefore I felt the need to use this opportunity to share this with the tzibur. We have 2 more points. what is that 2 weeks ago, we didn't have a shiur last week because of Tisha B'Av. 2 weeks ago, we had about whether chickpeas need to be Bishul Yisrael. And the conclusion I did come to was that even though they may be edible when they're raw mamish, but then they dry out and then you have to soak them and then cook them. And therefore, so someone wrote to me that perhaps when you soak them, then they are edible now. So then again, they're edible raw. So I'm advised from my home kitchen that it actually the advice is given not to eat chickpeas after the soaking because they have some kind of tannin which develops, and it's a very unhealthy thing to have. Once you cook them, then that tannin is dispelled with, and then it's safe to have them. It reminds me of the Gemara about turmesin, which is lupins. Don't tell me what a lupin looks like. I have no idea. But it says in the Gemara that turmesin has to be cooked 7 times, and only then can it be eaten. Otherwise, it's actually not good to eat. So the chickpeas, is this a similar idea? Raw chickpeas, even after soaking, they may be chewable, but they're not edible. Therefore, then there is a need. Well, like any vegetable which is ein nechal chai, is subject to the dinim of bishul akum, or needing to have bishul Yisrael. So, and the argument we said last week, 2 weeks ago, was that they are plausibly ola al shulchan melachim. The other point being that Rabbi Yosef Lando says to me, how can you talk about people buying chickpeas from commercial things? They in the factories, the same factory could be also producing non-kosher products, or even on another part of the factory. And the way it works, the factories, they have these pipelines of steam, which are heated in one place, and then they go through the whole system and they're heating, boiling the foods, so that's how the foods are cooked. So imagine the same steam has gone through the pipeline, and here is pork sausages in with baked beans. It's warming, it's cooking that. Then the same steam comes along, and now it's cooking vegetables, and they're sold to you as a vegetarian. But the taste of the flesh would be going into the water, to the steam. Therefore, we need to have buying. Point being that buying commercially food produced vegetables, even though the ingredients are free of any non-kosher food, but they're still a concern about the steam, and therefore it needs to have some kind of kosher approval. So those are the 2 points. Now, one last thing is that we did have a discussion about making Kiddush. Well, if you remember, that this was a fellow who had an allergy and he wasn't able to drink wine, whether he could make Kiddush and his wife will drink the wine, which I said was okay. And then I was thinking, I don't know whether I mentioned it by the shiur, Mela Friday night, he can make Kiddush and someone else, we'll drink the wine, that's okay. But Shabbos day, the Kiddush is just a brach on a glass of wine. So it's just a birchas hanenin. So just like I can't, if you want to eat an apple, I cannot say a bracha for you to eat the apple, because I have no achrayis, I have no arvis for you to eat apples, to say a bracha on an apple, therefore. So what's Kiddush by day? It's just a birchas hanenin. But what you can see here on the screen, that the Piskei Teshuvos in Siman Reish Beites about Kiddush by day, and he writes the following: that although the Kiddush is, after all, just a ber priagofen, the psukim which you say before, that's just more cosmetic, should we say? The Kol Mokem, it's got a status of birchas hamitzvos. The Kiddush by day, after all, why are you making Kiddush? Not because you're in the mood of having a glass of wine. You're doing it because there's a mitzvah of Kiddush. Therefore, even though it's just a birchas hanenin, it still has a status of a mitzvah, and therefore you could make a bracha and someone else will drink the wine. So if a man comes home from a Kiddush in Shul, and in Shul he made Kiddush, he is Yotze Kiddush, he comes home, and there are guests there. All right, so he could make the bracha like a glass of wine, like a becher, and then give it to someone else to drink. That's also okay. Why? Because it's not stam a birchas hanenin, it's a birchas hamitzvah type of bracha, and therefore he can be moitzi the tzibur. That's what I have to share with you for this evening, and with this I can safely say to you, good Shabbos, because it's before Friday afternoon. Wish you all a good Shabbos. And coming from Nachmu, we should see the Nechama, Bebin Yerushalayim, Yedei Mashiach Tzidkenu, B'mheru Yameinu Mamash. Well.